Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Neptune Sunday. It's your boy V Moss. Every time we have a guest, I say that it's a special guest because anyone that takes the time to chat with us, like, is a blessing. So I'm happy to have anyone join us to tell the story and go on this journey with us. But today we got multi-hyphenate creative, award-winning producer, director, and journalist Joseph Patel on the show. Joseph, good to see you, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm a fan of the podcast. So when I reached out to you, what was it, like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
I'm glad we're here now.
Yeah, man. And it's like I'm super appreciative of just any love and any but like people who are actually in the space. Like I extra really appreciate like because it's people who have lived it and that and it shows like this is a labor of love and it's doing good work to tell the stories of the culture and like that's what it's all about. I've said this before, like, and I'm sure you know this and you appreciate this. Like the podcast and media game can be a little bit inflammatory in some cases, and like this is what we dive into is like the stories of real people and real experiences. So appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get right into your story, man. Like growing up in the Bay, man. Like that's a unique place. That's a unique music place, a unique hip hop place. But like, what were some of your early musical influences? Like growing up with parents that were immigrants, like did they give you any musical influences or pass on any music that kind of like helped inspire your love and passion for music?
No, my dad liked records. I think his like prime era is like the disco era. And, I loved vinyl as an artifact as a kid and playing those. And I think some of the first records I bought were like 45s because they were kid sized, right? Like,
Hmm.
and I'd sit in my living room and listen to my dad's records, but there was nothing really to write home about those records. Their tastes skewed very pop, very mainstream, and my mom liked AM radio, and like her favorite things were like the Police and Daryl Hall and John Oates and Laura Branigan. Like she loved that stuff. And she just had like earworm songs like were her favorite.
Gotcha.
And yeah, but people like the other kids that I grew up with, music was so pervasive as a part of like the social culture of being kids in the Bay. And you heard music everywhere. And for me, it was at a really young age, we would play sports in the cul-de-sac of my suburban town, Fremont, California,
Mhm.
and we'd play music all the time. And it was a mix. It was like Van Halen or Too Short. It was like Too Short was real big in the Bay. And at first I was like, what is this? Van Halen was real big. Like we'd play that. It was just like a mix of stuff because, kids of different backgrounds listening to different things. But really, I started to get more and more obsessed with music. And I'm of an age when, like, in the Sunday paper, you'd get this Columbia House Records and Tape Club, and it'd be like 8 tapes for a penny.
Yes.
And I'd send that in every time. And my mom would be like, but what are you signing up for? Like, I'd get the cassette, and then she'd have to like write them to like cancel the thing, and then I'd do it again. And it was just like that's how I sort of amassed my tape collection.
Gotcha.
And yeah, it was just music was such a way for me to talk to other kids at a very young age. And being a kid of an immigrant, like, having any sort of currency, social currency was like your way in. So, um but as I got older, like especially junior high and high school, I became obsessed with music and really junior high. And music. It's funny. I say this on like film panels that I'm on. Like, music was the way. It was my gateway to the world. It's literally how I learned about photography and literature and economics and like, my social justice leanings and like my politics all came from music. And I was one of those kids. Like I'd get on the train in high school. I'd get on the train, go to Berkeley, to Rasputin Records or Leopold's. This is right before Amoeba opened, And I'd buy records and CDs and tapes and just obsess over the liner notes and the artwork and read everything I could. And once a month I'd go to Palo Alto to the Stanford University, or it was a bookstore on University Avenue near the Stanford campus, and they were the only store I knew that carried like NME or Melody Maker magazine, and it's just like I just became obsessed with it, and then really I think that scared my parents because they were just like, "What? What is this? Like, don't make it your thing. Like, it's fine to like it, but don't be obsessed with it." But that I was obsessed with it.
Yeah. Like I definitely relate to, just the space of growing up in a diverse place. Like Richmond historically is not really thought of as being diverse, but like I felt like in my perspective of being a black kid, and that's part of the reason, and we'll get to this later, like my connection to the Neptunes and Nerd is like just being around a bunch of different kids because I was in the accelerated classes or, all that where, yes, I was listening to a lot of at the time, Rockefeller Bad Boy stuff, but also like one of my favorite albums of our time is Californication by Red Hot Chili Peppers. Like that's just the mix of the people that I was around and the spaces. So I really always appreciated just being able to have that taste for music that is eclectic, but then it leans into, you know, how hip hop is connected to all of those genres still. I mean, black music in general, but like hip hop too. So talk about that transition from being like, okay, I'm listening to everything, but now, what really made you just dive in to hip hop? And then also how that led to your journalism background.
Yeah, I mean, I've never not listened to everything.
Yep.
Like in high school, I was a goth skater kid. My favorite groups were Bauhaus and The Cure and Susie and the Banshees and New Order. But I also liked Public Enemy and a little later, like Tribe and De La. But like my tastes were always eclectic, and really I never really fit into one group. Like I was always the person that could like really connect with all different groups.
Sure.
And some of the first hip hop I listened to was Too Short from being in the Bay, and it was foul mouth rap music, and so it felt bad, like it felt rebellious listening to that. And Public Enemy was where I was like, oh right, this is music that really crystallizes a lot of how I feel of being a minority. And it was really interesting because my mom was born and raised in Uganda, and I found probably around high school is when I realized, like probably senior year of high school, freshman year of college is when I realized, being South Asian really gave you a privilege to interact with black or white in America. And most South Asian parents were steering you towards being raised the white way, right? And in hindsight, I get why. Like they probably saw how the way America treats black people, and they're like nothing near that. But at the time, I was really confused because I was like, well, are my parents racist? You know what I mean? Like my best friend in junior high and half of high school before he transferred out was a kid who was black kid who was a basketball player. On the team, he was I was really into sports, but I couldn't play, and we were like thick as thieves, and he got me into music, I got him into music, but like my parents kind of had a problem with that a little bit, and I didn't understand why until in hindsight, like immigrant parents, like I they were fearful, I think, of how blacks were treated in America,
Right.
and they didn't want me swept up in that. But like by the time I got to college, so in high school, I'm obsessed with music. I spent a lot of time listening to college radio, and there was two stations, KZSU in Stanford that I would get, and KFJC, which was in the Los Altos Hills. And that was really an education for me because I would hear music that just you wouldn't hear anywhere else. And when I got to UC Davis to begin my college education, the first thing I did was seek out the college radio station, KDVS 90.3 FM. Um, and I listened to two shows. I listened to two hip hop shows that I just immediately got attracted to. One was by this woman named Voodoo Child, and the other was by a guy named Jeff Chang, DJ Zen. And I would go and hang out at their shows because they were I you know would I when I, once I heard their shows I was like I want to meet these people and like go to the radio station. They were both great, but DJ Zen changed my life. Like he was Asian American, played a great hip hop show, but for him it was more the music was more reflective of deeper cultural meanings,
Yep.
and he was my first mentor really. And he's the one that got me into writing. He's the one that we formed a little independent hip hop crew out there at the time with DJ Shadow, Black Alicious, Lyrics Born. At the time, he was Asia Born. A year later, this guy Latif comes through, and we had a little crew called Soul Sides. And we were, pressing up records and tapes and doing shows. And me and Jeff were the only two non-artists, but we wrote for magazines. And eventually I became hip hop director at the station, then music director at the station. Originally, I started writing for this local hip hop magazine called The Bomb Hip Hop Magazine. That turned into another, this was like early 90s, so a big explosion of independent hip hop magazines around the country.
Sure.
And so I was writing for The Flavor, which was out of Seattle. Then that turned into writing for a magazine like Herb, which was like an underground, like really multi-genre magazine, but focused on dance music and rave culture, but a lot of hip hop based in LA. Discovered Freestyle Fellowship. That sort of opened my like was a portal for me because I was like, oh my god, MCs like who are rapping like jazz, and it's like, they were my favorite group for so long, and the writing started taking off, the label started taking off, my radio show was popular. It was just like a thing. And it's funny because after a couple years ago, after we won the Oscar for Summer of Soul, my the alumni director at UC Davis reached out to me and said, hey, the chancellor does these series of talks with different prominent alumni. We do like 6 a year. We want you to be the first of the coming school year. And I started laughing because like I didn't really pay attention in school. I got a degree in economics with a minor in English. And I didn't really remember anything from school. The only thing that I remember is the radio station and what that did for me. And I said, I'm happy to come back and do this talk, but I'm warning you, I'm going to talk about the radio station and how transformative that was for me in my life, because I can trace all the success I have right now back to that origin. That's where I found my tribe. That's why I learned about the world. That's where I met my crew. That's where I started writing, started storytelling, fell in love with it. So all of it got traced back to that radio station. And the radio station was a blessing. At the time, it was 5,000 watts, which is massive for a college station. Now it's 13,000 watts. Right. And when I went back, I said, you guys battle every year about the budget for this radio station when you don't realize you have this like gem, like unique, only kind of radio station like this in the country. And you should lean into it more. And thankfully, the last couple of years, I've been working with them to like, help bring that to life.
Yeah, that's dope. Like, I think that's something I definitely appreciate. Like, in my time in grad school, I ended up getting a career in sports, but like the work that I did in grad school at Georgetown was very secondary to the experiences I had as an intern and, volunteering at stuff that was happening in DC to get more experience and connections that helped me get there. So like, I think that's definitely a message that is clear, right? Like, and I think that these schools got to be careful with that and understand, like, yo, you want to get us to come back and talk, but we're gonna keep it real because, like, that's really what's gonna help make the next generation be prepared and feel like it's attainable. Like, here's how we did it, and don't like not pay attention in school, but like, what else are you doing?
Yeah, and I think my message to the university was, and I should say UC Davis chancellor Gary May he understands that education isn't just theoretical and it's not just um, the classics, right? That they have to be, as a UC, University of California campus, they have to adapt to preparing people for the workforce, but also, what I told him is I said, look, I'm not athletic, right? I'm not playing sports.
Right.
And for me, the radio station was where all the misfits gathered. Misfits. And, a lot of us have gone on to do really great things. DJ Shadow is a huge artist, right? Jeff Chang is an incredible author and storyteller and academic. And, I've had my success and Lyrics Born, Latif, like all these, like our crew. And that's just one year.
Right.
So, yeah, I think, I think one of the things I tell young people now when I talk to them is one, you have time, right? Like figure out what you do, everything to figure out what you want to do. And also you got to find your tribe. You got to find the people that you can make stuff with and create with and also get feedback from and really be critique each other so you can get better and find the thing that you want to do.
Yep.
And I think that was that for me, the radio station was that place. But I loved doing a radio show. I miss it. I want to do it again. I taped everything. I have like 3 boxes of cassettes of all my radio shows every week. I was writing for magazines then, and one of the things benefits of writing for magazines in the '90s is you'd get the album in advance,
Mhm.
sometimes 3, 4 months in advance. And because I was on this little radio station in California that no label in New York or LA was ever going to listen to, I would play advances of anticipated albums on my radio show, which made me just like a different level. So I remember the summer of '93, excuse me, I was writing the bio, and then I got the idea that if I wanted the album even before the magazine writers got them, I would write the bio, because the bio is what gets written and sent with the advance. So I wrote the bio for Midnight Marauders,
Mhm.
and they gave me that record like 5 months before it came out. I had a cassette, still have the cassette, and I listened to it all summer, back and forth commuting to my summer job. And I played it on my radio show at the end of summer or at the end of the school year, the year prior, and was playing tracks off Midnight Marauders for a bunch of people in Davis, California, who probably, were telling their friends back home. Like, so it was kind of a hustle, but it was real, just all rooted in love of the music and love of the culture.
Yeah. So kind of sticking with that, the idea of the next generation, right? Like going from journalists and hip hop to now making films that are just talking about the legacy and impact of music, especially Black music across multiple genres, all genres. Like, why do you feel like that work is important? Like to tell those stories on projects like Summer of Soul and Sly Lives, aka The Burden of Black Genius, which I've seen both. I actually watched them in reverse order. But I think, just want to hear your perspective, especially working with Quest and like how you guys talk about like the intent of those to tell those stories for the people who it impacts, past, present, and future.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Making movies now is connected to what I was doing back then. It's all storytelling. Like,
Yep.
I spent a career as a music journalist, and then towards the end of the '90s, when the dot-com boom happened, I was doing the, work at dot coms, and then the bubble burst, and really journalism's bubble was bursting too. I could tell I used to get paid like $1 a word or $2 a word at certain magazines, and now it was like 50 cents a word, and it was like I could sense it was coming. And also, I didn't love it as much anymore. I'd been doing it, and I originally started doing it because I loved being able to, I love two things. I loved being able to ask artists about the process or like a favorite song or how this thing got made. But I also like seeing my name in print. I like being like part of the people who shaped the conversation culturally. Even if I couldn't really articulate that at the time, looking back at it, that's what I really liked about it. So, and I think so. Towards the end of the '90s, early 2000s, I was struggling. It was harder to write for me. I didn't think I was really good at it. I was losing interest, and I took a job at MTV. I was freelancing too, so it was like I didn't really feel like I was getting better or growing as a person. And do you know John Caramonica at the New York Times, pop
Yeah.
music critic? So John and I are really, really tight friends and have been for a long time. And he says that one of the reasons he got into writing is because of me. He read my stuff and he's like, "Oh, I can do this. Like, I like this music too. Let me write about it." And I always joke I got out of writing because of him, because he was just so much better at it than I was. And so I took this job at MTV, and I was given the opportunity to transition from writing news stories every day to producing news pieces. And that just, again, another life-changing moment for me. Because what I realized is I loved storytelling. I struggled with writing, and I just wanted to keep doing the storytelling. And that eventually evolved into making these documentary films. And along the way, I've done a lot of non-music stuff, a lot of non-hip hop stuff, a lot of non-music stuff. I worked at Vice for 4 years, and I traveled the world doing news stories. Um, but I really loved, I really love, again, because music was the way I learned about the world. Telling music stories is just where I feel most comfortable. And Summer of Soul is one of those just once in a lifetime stories. It's a music story, but really it's the story of America,
Yeah.
and even just like what gets treated as history, what's remembered, what's not, what's forgotten, why. And so that was a really um it was really intuitive to me to figure out how to tell that story with Amir. And I think we made it in a way that could find the biggest audience possible. Like, well, there's certainly parts of that movie where we could have just nerded out and just made the nerdy version of that. But we realized we weren't just telling a music story, we were telling something bigger. And in order to reach the biggest audience possible with that bigger story, we had to make certain sacrifices. I think it all worked out, obviously. Um, but yeah, I just love storytelling. And I think it's so important because black music is the blueprint, right? Just quite frankly, for all of what we listen to, how the industry works, like all of it is black music. And um, through music, through black music, we can learn a lot about ourselves and learn about this country and preserve these stories, but also, if told well, give us insight into how we progress in the future. And I think that's sort of the real crux of it for me.
Yeah. And I think it's so important. Like the storytelling and passing it down is a tradition that is in Black culture and has existed forever. And I think just the way that it happens through music is an accessible way that we just got to make sure we're intentional about trying to keep passing down that legacy, man.
Yeah, and look, as media gets consolidated and becomes more corporate, the opportunities to tell those stories dwindle.
Right.
And so, however we can tell those stories, this podcast, Twitter threads, people who write books still. It's writing books is probably the most one of the most thankless things you can do
Yeah.
for the amount of money you get back. And but preserving these stories, reporting, doing the work, it has purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so one of my key takeaways from watching Sly Lives was just like, and you talked a little bit about this when you had your interview with OK Player, was this idea that, society kind of dehumanizes our Black artists in a specific way, right? Like we look at them as superhuman and they're held to these unrealistic expectations, but the moment they make mistakes and they don't meet those expectations, they're torn down. And I really appreciated how in telling that story about Sly that you chose to interview some artists from our generation who have had a similar experience. And so that included the late great D'Angelo, who one of our most beloved Virginia people in general. Talk a little bit about how important his perspective was to that film, and then like any cool stories that you might have had from interacting with him over the years.
Yeah, it turns out that was his last interview,
Wow.
which has really kind of stopped me in my tracks. Really the premise of Sly Lives, The Burden of Black Genius, is comes from Amir, right? It's his lived experience
Yep.
and something I've observed, but it's something he's lived. And so when we first started talking about Sly and the story we wanted to do, that was his premise. Was he was like, look, can you imagine being Sly Stone in 1969 and you're 26 years old and you've just headlined Woodstock and you're on the top of the world. Everyone looks at you like you've solved race relations in America. And then you do this album, what the pressure must have been on, on him. What that must have felt like. And then you do this album that's kind of rooted in his blackness, and then he gets treated like he did something wrong,
Right.
and he gets and these white rock critics that loved him a couple years prior use really take liberties in their language and how they critique him, and you realize, oh, they don't really see him as human.
Right.
And I think that when we looked at that story and you look at Sly's arc, you know, we couldn't talk to him because he was sick, but we could talk to people by proxy who have similar experiences. D'Angelo being probably the most obvious. And Amir and D'Angelo had a relationship, and so, but it wasn't an easy get. Like it took a year of asking, couple false starts. The night of the interview, he was 8 hours late. Even Amir, who I guess I'm not really talking out of school if I say this, but Amir was frustrated by the end of the night. He was ready to go. I knew how important getting D'Angelo was and how far we had come. Not that Amir didn't, but I was just really that was my focus all night. Was like, even in the crew that we had shooting that, I told them, I said, listen, I need to know you can hang. I don't know whether this is going to happen or not, but I'm going to wait till it does. And everyone was down. And then when it happened, I wanted the most raw conversation possible. And Amir and I talked about, not having anyone in the room, and so I had the DP set up the camera, frame the shot, and just leave. And I had the sound person. We had the wires. We closed the door, and she's on the other side of the door. And it was just Amir and D'Angelo in the room, and me hiding in a corner, and just letting them talk.
Wow.
And I've never done anything like that before. It's not prudent to do that because if he moves out of frame, then you don't have it. But I was keeping an eye on it and just took a risk, And we got some of the rawest D'Angelo stuff. And it was funny because we told him we wanted to talk about Sly, but really we wanted to talk about him.
Yeah.
And sort of like a couple points in the interview, he was like, "I thought I was here to talk about Sly," and you know what I mean. And it's like we're like, "Yeah, you are though." Yeah, man, I'll never forget that. And I knew how important getting that interview was, how rare it was, and I didn't, obviously until he got sick and passed, I didn't realize just how important and rare that was. But I think getting his perspective, I mean, he's one of those ones, he's one of the rare ones. And it's just unfortunate that we couldn't really see what else he had to give us.
Yeah, man. I mean, his passing hit us. Like I'm from Richmond. I'm from North Side, he's from South Side, but still like just thought about my experiences listening to his music in my whole life. And like, when Black Messiah came out, it was a huge deal because I was living out of Virginia for the first time in my life. I was in Houston, Texas, but like the group of people that I spent the most time with that were like from Texas, like were very big and excited as much as I was that this new D'Angelo music was coming out, and we listened to that together all the time. So like that's a huge memory for me, and just like a huge loss for us in general, but like specifically from us from Richmond, Virginia, like
Yeah.
super impactful.
I went to the funeral and it felt like a local funeral. I mean, obviously there's star power there.
Yeah.
I mean, having the band on stage was a mix of the Soultronics and the Vanguard, and Stevie Wonder comes out to do the first musical number. It's like what? But it felt like there were more people there who knew him as Michael from Richmond
Right.
than there were people who knew him as D'Angelo, and you could feel that as soon as you walked in, and that was really special, I think.
Yeah. That's what I heard from people that were there too, man. And it's, funerals are never easy, but I think that that's one thing that's left on us, people that are left behind, is to make sure that legacy and that celebration is what they would, as close to what we would think that they would want it to be. And I feel like from what you guys have talked about and what I've heard from other people, like it sounds like it was what it needed to be.
Yeah, I mean, look, I also went to Sly's funeral this year because he
Oh,
passed,
yeah, yeah,
and he passed a few months after our movie came out, and that was hard too in a different way. I'd never met Sly. I'd met D'Angelo a handful of times and had written about him and had obviously, done that last interview, but
right.
Sly I never met, and the first time I meet him is at the viewing.
Mhm.
He's in a casket, and it was just a trip.
Yeah,
And that funeral was a lot smaller. A lot of history in that room in terms of family relationships. A lot that didn't get resolved in his lifetime, I think. So you could feel that in the room a little bit. That was a huge loss. Losing Sly's a huge loss, but I think culturally, probably lost him a long time ago.
hmm,
Um, it's a miracle he survived as long as he did, and I think for the sake of his family, I think that's a good thing, right? He got to reconnect with his kids, his grandkids. Like that was cool that he, especially black art. A lot of black artists like don't survive.
right,
With a D and Angie Stone, perfect examples. It's just like it's a blessing that Sly got to live as long as he did.
right. Yeah, man. So sticking with our from D'Angelo to other parts of Virginia, podcast about the Neptunes. So you mentioned to me you interviewed them a bunch of times, but like tell me how you got the opportunity to write the liner notes for the first three Nerd albums.
Yeah, so I should be more specific. It wasn't the liner notes. It was
Okay,
the
okay.
bio. It was the bio.
The bio. Okay, cool, 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 cool.
And the first bio, so my In Search of is the album for me.
Okay.
I was as soon as I heard the Neptunes, I was obsessed, right? Just obsessed.
Yep.
Here were two people that combined rhythm and melody into one singular thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd never heard anything like it. I still to this day feel like it's underappreciated. And they were able to synthesize rhythm and melody into these huge pop songs. And they're geniuses. And then in 1999, I was working at 360 Hip Hop, which was Russell Simmons's web venture at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had just written about D'Angelo, and the guy at Virgin Records, this guy named Kavi, rest in peace. He's passed now. I think he passed during the pandemic. Kavi was like, "Oh, well, do you know the Neptunes?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm obsessed." And he's like, "How do you know the Neptunes?" And I'm like, "This." And I had the Clipse album because I had the advance of the first Clipse album that was supposed to come out on Elektra. I was obsessed. And he's like, "Well, they have a band called N.E.R.D." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, they're doing like rock songs, but they're all Neptune style." And I was like, and he hit me with an advance. And this is when this is 1999 when Virgin was going to put it out. And just for you, I broke out the advance
Ooh,
that he gave me.
ooh.
And it says Nerds. Not even Nerd. They didn't even know what it was. And they didn't have a title for the album yet. And it says produced by the Neptunes. And what's crazy about this is they didn't know what they had.
Yeah.
They thought a Neptunes album. They were like, "Oh yeah, we'll sign. We're gonna put it out. Neptunes are gonna do an album. We're gonna put it out." They thought that was gonna be like Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears, and it was gonna be just hit after hit after hit. And they get this, which is I don't even know what you call this. And it's incredible. I heard this record. I popped this CD in, and it was incredible. Blew me away because this is an American rock record that is made with electronic instruments and has a particular characters that they play, and they just execute it flawlessly. And I still am obsessed with this record. It's 25, 26 years later. I'm obsessed with this record. And it was really, and then it got bopped around to different labels because no one knew what the fuck to do with it.
Right.
And then it landed back at, I think, at Virgin. and but it didn't come out till like 2 years later. And this is and then so in 2001, I think there was an electronic version of this album.
Right.
And then Pharrell saw Spymob and was like, no, let's do it with this band and that version. But along the way, because Kavi knew I was obsessed with this, he asked me to write the bio.
Got you.
And so I interviewed the group, and it was like my second time interviewing them. I had written a thing on the Neptunes in like '97 for this British magazine that was like an offshoot of Dazed and Confused. And then I think I wrote about them for Vibe at some point, '98 or '99. And so I wrote the bio, and I was trying to write the bio like I normally write bios, which is like, here's the story of the band and information for you. And I couldn't do it better than what Pharrell was telling me in the interview. So I just wrote it from their perspective. I just took everything they told me and wrote this bio as if it were from the band, writing a letter to the listener. At some point, this became the liner notes to the record. I think when the electronic version was going to come out, because they sent me a mock-up of it. They said, this is what the artwork's going to look like. We're going to put your liner notes here. It was on the website as like the liner notes for this record. But then when the final version came out, they had killed it. But I still have the press kit where they sent the bio with it, and then it was their bio on their website for a long time. So I did the same thing for the second album. Interviewed them, wrote the bio. They said, will you format this for the liner notes? And I'm like, sure. And I did. And then they killed it again. And then the third album, I did just the bio. And through the way, and along that whole time, like I interviewed them a bunch. And when I got to MTV, they were blowing up, obviously, all over MTV. They had been. But I interviewed them a bunch when I was at MTV. Pharrell gave me one of the best compliments I'd ever received from anybody at the time, which was, some host was asking the questions. He's like, why are you asking the question? Here's the dude that knows about music. He should be asking the questions. And I was like, that felt good. Even though I never wanted to be on camera, but like that felt good. But yeah, this is the album. I think they fucked up by doing the live band version.
So that's your preference. You prefer OG version,
I prefer the OG version because it is such a radical idea to do a rock record with electronic instruments. That is a radical idea in 2025. It was a even more radical idea in 1999, 2000, and 2001.
Yeah.
I think conceding that you're making a rock record and then bringing in a rock band just really sucks the air out of it.
Yeah.
But the songs are still good. I think Truth or Dare probably sounds better with the band than it does with the electronics. It sounds more ferocious, but I still love the electronic version better. And because I knew we were doing this, I wanted to, on this advance, there are 3 songs that aren't on the album. Actually, 3 songs and an interlude that aren't on any released version of the album. And if you will, I'll play you a little bit of it. So this is a song called Why Must I Die?
Wow.
Which actually opens, so there's an intro to the record, which is the intro that came out on the version that I think everyone has. Or maybe it didn't end up in the final version. And then there's this song called Why Must I Die? Yeah, anyway, so you can hear that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Why Must I Die? And then there's a song called What's Wrong With Me? This ends up being on the best of, but it originally was on this album.
Yeah, I've heard that one. I've never heard of Why Must I Die, but I have heard.
Yeah. And what's funny is Why Must I Die kicks off the album, the advance I got. It kicks it off.
Wow.
And then this is a song, and again, shout out to Virginia. This is a song that N.E.R.D did with Kenna. I believe Kenna wrote this. I haven't seen this one anywhere in 26 years. I don't think anybody has this shit. And Pharrell, when I saw him last, which was like 10 years ago, I was like, "What happened to this song?" And he said they they gave this song to Sugar Ray to do for one of their albums. It got tracked and then it never came out. But it's called Here She Comes. And this is the part I love. Yeah, anyway.
Dope.
Yeah, it's a dope song.
Dope.
It's funny because I have that in my phone because I still listen to that album and I listen to the OG version.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like if I ever see Tyler, the creator, out in the wild, I'll plan that because he'll lose his mind off that song.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of my dream interviews for the show is to like get Tyler to just like do what you just said to nerd out about stuff like because I know he'll appreciate it as much as we do for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
man. I mean, like
I pulled that special for you.
I appreciate that, man. Like I don't necessarily I think my perspective on OG versus Spymob version is really just about like the fact that when I was coming up in 2001, 2002 is like heavy, okay, it's download days. So like I remember having the OG version first and just being like, yo, I love these because they're more Neptune songs, right? Like, but then I think that when I actually listened to it as a full album, it was the Spymob version later, like and years later, like not even when it came out, like, but
Yeah, because I don't think the OG electronic version ever got released here, right? I
no,
think
only in UK, I think.
only in the UK, and then like it's not even on streaming,
Nah,
you
which is
know,
crazy.
and I actually think it's the Spy Mob version is the version that streams in the UK now too,
Hmm.
because I don't think the electronic version's on streaming in the UK.
Hmm.
So it's I don't understand why they don't like put both versions out.
Yeah. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about your time at MTV, talked about how that helped transition you from writing to producing because you created a show called My Block, which I thought is one of the most important shows of MTV at that time, especially like in I think MTV was doing a great job in our era and the time that you were there in the early 2000s where it was like shows that were about music but weren't just like music videos or performances where you got to get to know the people and get to see their personalities. And My Block, I thought, did a great job with that. But just talk about how that idea for that show came about.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. I had no idea what I was doing. But I mean MTV was a place I came to and like it was like grad school for me. I came in as a writer and I left knowing how to direct, produce, edit, shoot.
So,
And got to do that. Live direct, live produce. Yeah, and you know, there was this thing at MTV called Hip Hop Week, and MTV2 was real big back then. Shout out to Mabasa who ran MTV2. And so, you know, what we would do is, and you know, I was doing a lot of hip hop stuff at MTV. It was me, Shaheem Reed, Ramon Dukes, this guy Sean Lee. We'd worked with Sway. And you know, the idea was, well, we had these like two hip hop weeks that were channel wide on MTV and MTV2. And so the news department, I worked at MTV News and Docs, and our job was to make, let's do 5 stories, one a day for Hip Hop Week. And I was, you know, MTV let me do a lot of things. I don't know why. I earned their trust first. I did everything they asked me to do for like 6 months, and I earned their trust, and I saw what worked. So at MTV, we had this thing called Hip Hop Week. So I was deep into Houston hip hop, like Southern hip hop. And I loved chopped and screwed music. And I heard this song, it was like 2005. And I heard this song called Still Tippin' in 2004 that was on this Chameleonaire mixtape. I loved it. And then I heard it, a new version in like January or February 2005, maybe even actually a little sooner. And Chameleonaire was gone, and it was Paul Wall. And I was like, oh, I like this version better. And then I was in the Bay for Christmas. Yeah, so it was definitely in 2004, end of 2004. I was in the Bay for Christmas, and I heard Still Tippin' on the radio out in the Bay. I was like, and it fit perfectly with all the bass stuff. And I was like, oh, this song is going to blow. And I forget the DJ who played it, but it was on KMEL. And I was like, oh, this song's going to blow. So I pitched for Hip Hop Week that week in 2005. I said, let's go to Houston and just do this thing on Houston hip hop because I think it's going to blow up. And Mike Jones was that song was starting to hit radio. Huh? And so we did 5 segments in Houston, all on Houston hip hop. And my boss at the time said, let's comp this together into a 30-minute show. And I said, yeah, that's cool. And he's actually the one that came up with the name My Block. I mean, it was on my short list already because of Scarface. But I was like, this makes all sense in the world. So Houston, so we comped it in a 30-minute show, and it did incredible on the channel, on both MTV and MTV2. Every time it aired, it got the same rating, same number. 350,000 to 500,000 people are watching it every time it aired. And so they just play the shit out of it. And then after the first week of numbers, they were like, can you do this again? I said, yeah, this is our chance to look at different regions around the country, at the music, but also at the culture underneath it, and show the similarities from city to city, but also these very unique, distinctive qualities that make that city, and that scene, and that feeds the sound of that city. So the next episode we did was Memphis. That was more in true MTV fashion. They were like, let's tie it into a promo thing and we'll get ad money. And so they tied it into the release of Hustle and Flow. So, for some reason, it's very Hustle and Flow heavy, that episode, not my favorite episode. But then I was like, oh, this, we could do just different cities, different scenes. And in 2008, when the series was wrapping up, and I was covering the election that year. I was the lead producer for the election coverage in 2008. And they said, oh, we should probably wrap up this series with our 8th and final episode. And we were doing like 2-3 episodes a year. And I was like, listen, rather than go to like a big city like New Orleans, like I was hoping we'd go to New Orleans. At one point I wrote like what a New Orleans episode might look like. And I was getting better at directing. And it was like really fun to make. But I was like, let's do Virginia Beach. Like, let's, again, I was just really mostly for myself. I was like, let's do this thing. And I said, it'd be so unexpected, but people don't know that Pharrell and Chad and Timbaland have their studios on the same cul-de-sac, and that Missy's from here, and, just the rich musical history out of Virginia Beach. I loved the high school band angle, right, that the Neptunes came up through. I loved the idea of doing something on the Clipse, right, who were dropping the, We Got It for Cheap mixtapes at the time. And I had earned enough capital at MTV because everything I was doing was popping off. And that they're like, yeah, let's do it. So we did. And it was terrible because we went to Virginia Beach in the winter, which, as you know, is off season. And so it was like we did 2 trips to Virginia Beach to do that episode. And it was just like, it did not show Virginia Beach poppin' like it is in the summer. Right. Because we had to shoot it in the winter before all the election stuff really took the channel over. So I think we shot in February and March, which is just not the season, so, but, and so the episode itself looks really kind of low rent. We weren't able to show Virginia Beach in all its beauty. Right. It's like the show opens with Sway meeting the Clipse on the boardwalk, and everyone's in puffy jackets, and it's like, it's so funny, but there's something really beautiful about the non-beauty of Virginia Beach. We did a segment on, we did for us, we had so my idea was rather than do one segment on the Clipse, what we'll do is like five segments where the Clipse takes us through the seven cities.
Mm.
And their manager at the time was Jeezy.
Hmm.
And we were trying to, we started at like noon and we were trying to get through the seven cities by like sunset. And it was just, it wasn't happening.
Yes.
At some point, Jeezy is like driving on the shoulder, and we're supposed to follow him, and so like we're just all illegally driving on the shoulder of the freeway. And every time we'd get to a spot, it became a thing. Like we were only like in order to make it, we'd only have to spend like half hour, 45 minutes in a spot. But so many people would come out, and we wanted to give love to everybody that like it was like 1 hour, 2 hours, and this one, and it was just like it was too much. So we did that. We did a thing with Pharrell. We did a thing with Timbaland. We did a thing with Kenna and Chad together.
Yep.
We did a thing on HBCUs, and we gave Trey Songz his first look on camera. And I'll never forget the Trey Songz piece because we met his mother,
Mm.
who was just drop dead gorgeous, and we realized just like how old we were. We're like this dude Trey Songz is just a kid because his mom is like our age and she's gorgeous. So anyway, it was a really fun episode and probably one of my favorites actually, probably my favorite that we did.
So did Trey come down to 757 for that, or did you guys have a chance to go up there too?
Yeah, he was. I think his mom stayed there,
Yeah.
so it wasn't. We didn't go anywhere. The only thing we did travel outside of Virginia Beach for was to do a thing with Skills,
Mm-hmm.
which I felt obligated to do because Skills, I was a fan of his,
Hmm.
and so we came to Richmond to shoot that. But in the end, one of the things I was young, I didn't have a lot of experience. When we would do my block, we'd shoot like 50 hours of footage over the
Hmm.
course of 2 weeks, and in reality, the show is only 23 minutes long. And so you can't really put everything that you you want to put in the show. And I cut Skills out. We spent a whole day with him. I cut him out, and he's only in the bumper of one of the episode, like throwing a commercial or coming back from commercial. He got so heated at me. He's like, "You cut me out of the show," and I would get that a lot, right, from people because I just overshot. Like I didn't that part of my producing skill set because the idea was you shoot everything and then you figure it out in the edit. I'm not that kind of a director anymore, but at the time I was just learning, and I remember Skills just being so mad. And after Summer of Soul came out, he he gave me he didn't know he didn't put the two and two together yet, but he knew me as a Mirror's producer. And after Summer of Soul came out, he like sent me a DM on Instagram. He was like, "I love the movie. You guys did your thing." And I was like, "Oh, cool. You're talking to me again?" He's like, "What?" And I told him, and he's like, "Oh shit, that was you." And he's like, "I'm sorry, I was a hothead." And I said, "Look, I'm sorry. I thought, I gave you a false impression that we were going to use all this stuff." So
Yeah.
it was pretty funny. Now we're cool.
That's good. That's good to
Yeah,
hear, man. Skills is our guy for sure.
Skills is the homie.
Yeah, man. Like I really appreciate it. Like I said, I enjoy my block a lot because like that point for me in 2003, 4, right when I'm going from high school to college, but like that was my first few years at Hampton. And so like being a kid from Virginia, going to an HBCU in Virginia, but still understanding that all these people from a lot of places that you did those episodes are coming to Virginia, but like especially when you talk about Houston, like my roommate who was actually grew up with me in Richmond, but he like was super into the down south and he was like playing chopped and screw music. Like I joke and say like he would let that shit play and we would hear it. I would hear it in my dreams because he's just playing like all these Houston screw tapes and like I think that in my brain is and I think that's part of my perspective is because I got to experience it with people who were coming from those communities that's the peak of regional sound to me. It's like the early 2000s when it was like the
Yeah,
internet hadn't leveled everything out yet. It was like, yo, we are listening to Houston Screw have a crazy moment, and like Atlanta is still like Lil Jon is still popping, and Luda and Ti and all that is still going. And then I'm
Memphis.
with people who are from New York, and like I'm big into Rockefeller, so like meeting people that know Freeway and like all these people that are in all of that. Like Dipset was crazy, so like that is such a big part of my musical like experience that I really appreciate and don't take for granted is like being able to live what you were able to do through that show like in person in real life at Hampton was like one of my favorite things about that experience.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was cool for me is that I sensed that the regional sounds were really important. I think my what I'm really good at and what my block really taught me was how to share my favorite thing with a broad audience.
Cool.
Right? I had to like find storytelling wise. I had to find the sweet spot between um, the nerds who know everything about the scene and people who know nothing about it, and find the sweet spot where it makes sense and satisfying to both.
Yeah.
I got really good at that. Summer of Soul is that, right? Sly Lives is that. And um, one of the thrills about my block was it's like, oh, I get to share all this like stuff I love about Memphis hip hop and about
Yeah.
what's happening in Atlanta and what's happening. Like when we did Atlanta, we had the A segment, which is like whoever's big at the time, and the B segment, which was like who's the second biggest, and then there's a C segment that's always like a throwback to something older. There's another segment that's like what's next, and then there's this wild card segment. And for Atlanta, we did a great day in Atlanta, where
Yeah.
we got all the Atlanta hip hop artists together, as many as, as we could. Unfortunately, Outkast was like the one missing one, but it also gave me a chance to like really highlight some of the like things that I nerd out about, right? Like some of the the real underground DJs or some of the artists that are just like really just will never break out of that city,
Yeah.
but deserve a look, like Al Capone in Memphis, you know. So yeah, that was a really fun show to do, and I think it was the first regional hip hop show, like documentary show.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah, it was a blast. And I really, I wish I could do it again in some other form. But like you said, the internet has really leveled everything out where nothing really feels special anymore to a region.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
All right. So who do you think is the either you can say the best or your favorite of the frequent collaborators?
um, oh, that's a hard one. That's not rapid fire, man. That's a hard one. Um, I mean, honestly, it's hard. I would say, um, I would say the Clips are my favorite. Um, I don't think there's anything like Pharrell, Chad, and the Clips. Um, I'm partial to the first Justin Timberlake album. Like the Neptunes joints on there are incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Like real, like high level pop music.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Toxic by Britney Spears is one of the best songs ever made. Like so, but I probably the Clips. I mean, I know that's a predictable answer, I guess,
Yeah.
but shout out the first Justin Timberlake album.
Yeah, man. You said toxic. You mean what you call it? Not toxic.
Yeah, Britney Spears,
Slave.
Toxic.
Slave for you. I don't
No, Toxic is. Oh, that's right. They didn't do Toxic.
yeah, they did
They didn't produce Toxic. Someone else produced Toxic. But yeah, Slave for You is. Oh, Slave for You is like
yeah.
first. Just it's like I Love You, but
Yes.
for Britney, incredible.
Yeah. I don't know who now you're making me think about who
I
did
forget who
toxic.
produced Toxic.
Yeah, but like to that point though, like around that time, there was like a lot of people who were borrowing or being inspired by them where you're like, is this a Neptune song? Is it a Neptune song? You gotta look it up. Like, oh no, it's not. Like,
Yeah, I mean Toxic. I mean I misspoke, but yeah, Toxic is does not sound like a Neptune song, but Slave for You is the one I was thinking of in my head.
yeah, yeah. Okay, the next one is your favorite Neptune's Pharrell Chat R&B song.
Um, Usher. I mean, that is like that's like one of the best songs ever made.
Yeah,
So, um, yeah, that's probably top 20 songs for me.
yeah.
Yeah,
You don't
you
have
don't
to
have to call.
yeah, you
Yeah,
don't have to call it one of my favorites too. And then I mean, it's hard to choose, but just what's your favorite, like, let's just say underrated or one that's not appreciated, like Neptune's Pharrell Chad song that's not a mainstream song that like you put people onto, that's one of your favorites of all time.
they did a song for a group called One Life to Live,
Hmm.
which I also think is in they're based out of Virginia, I think. Maybe. And they were signed to Timbaland's label.
Okay.
And they Neptunes produced a song for them called Hot Tonight that I
Hmm.
love. And I don't think it ever came out. And I only know it because I went to the record store in Fremont, California, and and bought like at one point they all those singles that get released by labels, promo singles that like aren't the first single, aren't the second single,
Right.
maybe not even the third single, like really just bottom of the barrel single stuff. And for some reason I found a ton of Neptune stuff in there one day. And and I picked up this single, two copies of this single from this group called One Life to Live, and it was a song called Hot Tonight. I love that song. It's just I think Pharrell raps on it for a little bit too, and it's like real smooth, clubby, like yeah, it's a cool song.
Yeah. I'll have to go look that one. I've never heard that one. I gotta look that up.
I think I have it here somewhere. Hold on. Oh, and then, but see, I'm like one of these people. I'm like one of these people that I love unreleased songs. So that is a problem with me. Oh, here's what I would say, and these are probably the questions that I probably needed to beef up on before we did this. Under the radar song. It's a B side from Khalees called "The Spot."
Okay.
I love this song. It's off that, and also that whole the first album, Khalees' first album. There's a song on that album called. Oh man, should have done this beforehand. There's a song on the first Khalees album, and it is called. It's called "I Want Your Love."
Okay.
It's an album track, debut album produced by the Neptunes. It's incredible. That is like one of my favorite Neptunes productions ever. That is definitely under the radar.
Yep, I'm familiar with that one. Yep.
And then The Spot is a B side off a single from the Wonderland record
Hmm.
that never really came out, right? I mean, it ultimately did come out here, but um, I think it was the Lil Susie single. I think Lil Susie, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's a different single.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is Hot Tonight.
Neptunes, one life to live. Uh, 2000. Hey, hey, mama, only if you hot, you can do a dirty dick.
This is like the Virginia version of Junior Mafia. That's what One Life to Live is.
I'll have to look more and see who those guys are. I never heard that. But
And I
my
think they were signed to Timbaland's label too.
okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
So then is you sticking with OG In Search of as your favorite Nerd album? Okay.
Yeah, and I would say the thing I love about that album versus the other albums, that's the album where they're not self-conscious at all. They
Right.
just made something really pure and true. And then once it came out, the other albums are them being very self-conscious. They're very obviously playing characters, playing it up a little bit, kind of catering to what is happening as opposed to doing something just totally isolated and independent of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think I don't love any of the subsequent N.E.R.D albums in their entirety. Probably Seeing Sounds is the closest. You could probably take from Seeing Sounds, Nothing, and Fly or Die. You could probably make that into one incredible album.
Yep.
And then what was the last N.E.R.D album?
The self-titled one.
Self-titled one, which isn't really an N.E.R.D album because Chad is nowhere on that. Even though they propped him up like Weekend at Bernie style to make it look like he was in those sessions, he's not really on that record. So that one, Lemon is great, 1000 is great,
Yeah.
but top to bottom, not a great album.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Last thing. We talked about the Clips a little bit earlier. They're having a crazy year, being coming back after 16 years. nominated for 5 Grammys. What are your thoughts on Let God Sort Them Out? How does this album rank in your the Clipse discography? And then, any predictions about the Grammys?
I love the album. I think it's great. I think there's some flaws with it, so it's not a perfect album for me. But I like listening to it a lot. Mike Tyson "Blow to the Face" is one of the most incredible things I've ever heard in my life, and it's like a perfect thing where you like just want that song to go on for like 5 more minutes. Um, the singles they dropped were incredible off that album. I don't love Rico. I think Tyler is probably the weakest part of that. Is that the song he's on, Rico?
Tyler is on POV, and
He's
then
on POV, right? There's too
and
many
then
acronyms on this record. Um,
FICO is the one with Stove
Like,
Top.
yeah, that one's great. I love that record, and I'm really happy for them. And they are just so good and so deserving of this. They are one of those groups that should have always been bigger than they were, and they always got caught up in label stuff and sort of like big bro syndrome with the Neptunes. And Hell Hath No Fury is probably the best Clipse album. That first exclusive audio footage is incredible. The We Got It for Cheap Volume 2 is one of the most incredible. I listen to that once a month, in its
Amazing.
entirety.
Amazing.
Yeah,
The beat selection on Volume 2 was just like perfect,
incredible.
perfect.
When we when we uh when we won the Oscar, my first post on Instagram on Oscar night was posting "Roll with the Winners" off of Volume 2 because I had that loaded. I'm like, if we win, that's what I'm posting because that song makes me feel that way. So
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see them get one of the two when it comes to rap album of the year or album of the year. Like that would be amazing, just for them and for like obviously for us for Virginia. But both of those categories are just stacked. Like,
I don't really care about the Grammys. It's a it's a cattle call.
mm,
I don't think they treat rap music very well. Hip hop should have 10 categories, 15 categories, not just the two or three, four or five that they have. Um, you know, as someone who has a Grammy, it it doesn't make your it doesn't define anything. It's nice to have, especially for meetings with executives, but it doesn't define anything. If they don't win, we all know how good they are anyway.
right, 100%.
Tribe never won a Grammy, and Tribe's maybe one of the most influential hip hop groups ever.
Yep,
So
yep. Well, I appreciate you coming on to talk with me, man. Anything you got coming up next you want to share with everyone to look out for from you?
working on this next film, which is on Jay Dilla, and we've been working on it. It took about 3 years to put together. We started pre-production in April. We're in the middle of production now. I'm directing this one. Amir is executive producing, based on Dan Charnas's book Dilla Time.
Mhm.
Hopefully done in July, out early 2027. Um, and really excited about it. It's an accessible nerdy music doc.
As
So
it should be.
yeah, I mean, like, look, one of my dream projects. This was always one of my dream projects, the Jay Dilla doc. One of the other dream projects, and we should probably talk about this offline. Is I want to do a podcast series on In Search Of, multi-episode. There's just so many things to talk about that one album and the industry and music and people influenced by it and all that stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely talk about that for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Well, yeah, man. I thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I know you're busy. It's the holiday season too, so super thanks, super appreciative. Everybody, thank y'all for listening to another episode of Neptune Sunday. We'll catch y'all next time. Make sure to follow us on all social media, Instagram, Twitter, and like and subscribe to the YouTube page. We'll catch y'all next time. Peace and love.
Thanks for having me.